And when we don't, um, division has all the place to take up.
Welcome back to another episode of the Purpose Collective podcast. I have a wonderful guest with me for a really good discussion that I'm excited about. All my bookies, people who love to read books, people who want to write books. This is for you. This is for you if you've ever wondered about the book writing process, or even if you want to just hear someone else's journey walking out where God wants them to go and where God wants them to be, which is some things that we get to highlight here on this show because we want to know, like, how is God moving in the lives of other people? How has God revealed, assignments and purpose and destiny to other people so that we can glean some insight from others' process? Although our processes obviously are going to be different, but it's just good to see how someone can release their faith and where God is leading them and succeed. So without further ado, I am going to welcome our guest to the show. Her name is Javon, and Javon has 2 decades of experience in the publishing industry. She leads Embolden Media Group, and she's also written her own books. So she doesn't just work behind the scenes, she's in front of the scenes too with her own book. So Javon, welcome to the Purpose Collective podcast. All right, so I'm going to jump
Yeah.
into my first question, which is, as a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I initially wanted to be a nurse. My grandmother worked for I don't know how many years as a nurse's aide at the hospital, and from a young age, I kind of felt like I wanted to care for people in some kind of way. And so I wanted to be a nurse at first. And she used to send me, or whenever she came to visit, she would bring me little supplies like bandages and ace bandages and different things. And I would just go around fixing my friends up if they had any bumps or bruises. And then as I got older, I wanted to be a doctor. And so I wanted to be a doctor, I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. And then somewhere in there, there was like this underlying like dream of being somewhere writing on a beach and doing something creative or doing lots of creative things. So yeah, that's kind of where I was kind of, thinking career wise. Of course, I think I'm wanting to be what I'm seeing. But then there was this underlying burning thing about, oh, what would it be like to just be creative in some way, especially with writing.
Oh, I love that. Because, we sometimes think that our imagination and our dreams originate from us. But a lot of times, it's like God giving us those images in our brain so that we can, just have an idea of what's possible and what He wants in our lives. That's so neat. So, when did your love for books develop? Because I imagine that someone who's in the book industry, you've written a book, you're a book publisher, you're a book editor and agent, I think I could be mixing those up, but you've done a lot with books. And so my assumption is you love books.
Yes, I do love books. I love books and words. I
So
have
when did your
always loved, yeah, have always loved books and words. And um, it be so what I understand from my mom is that I started reading very young. I was reading books, full sentences, and so speaking young, having vocabulary, and then also reading. She said I started reading on my own about age 3 or 4, and then part of our family connectedness was reading and studying. My parents are readers. I was gonna say studiers. Hey, I just made up a word and that's fine with me. But yeah, they were just always in books reading, and so also part of our regular trips, or outings, that's what I want to say, were to the library. Absolutely. We were always going to the library. I was reading, reading, reading. And I think that's even where, I was starting to shape what I wanted to do with my life. I remember, just wanted to add this little bit. I remember I wasn't in Girl Scouts, but I remember getting a Girl Scout book, like a manual, and I read that thing from cover to cover. So it had first aid in it, it had how to tie a knot, it had, I mean, I just remember going through that book and just absolutely loving it, as well as how to be kind to people and how to be, all of that, how to make friends. I mean, all kinds of stuff was in this little handbook. But those are some of, my earlier memories and kind of what led me to just really find other worlds and books and just really love them.
How did your love of books evolve as you grew older? So, like as you became a young adult and
Yeah.
have transitioned throughout life, like has your taste
Yeah.
in books changed at all?
Um, I think so. I mean, I've always just really liked great writing. I would say that my tastes have broadened. I think as far as like the fun, guilty pleasure type, I don't want to use the word guilty because it's not guilty. There's
Right.
nothing to be ashamed of and liking fun, fast moving kind of either romantic comedies or thrillers or things like that. So I've always just had a great love of stories. Um, from when I was reading, I remember reading the series Sweet Valley Twins and Sweet Valley High. Those are the only chapter books for young girls that I remember. Of course, there was things like the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. I didn't like those as much as I liked the teen high school drama stuff, middle school drama. But anyway, yeah, I would say that it's broadened from those type of categories into I love nonfiction now as an adult. I love things that are challenging. I'm naturally a person who appreciates learning new things all the time. I love ideas. So books that are breaking out new ideas, breaking, helping you to become more productive or helping you move toward living a life you want to live, living a life God is leading you to live. I think some, Christian living books are helpful in some ways, but then there are also the part where it's like, well, what is the actual nuts and bolts of the how? And I think there are some great nonfiction books that do that. And so I'm always challenged by, doing something new or challenging myself in some way. I also appreciate sociology and cultural books as well.
Ooh, same. I love a good nonfiction book. For me, it's been difficult to find fiction books that I actually like because so many fiction books are just okay to me.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
So, and I
I
read
think
a
it's
lot.
important.
I read a lot, so
Yeah,
it's
go ahead.
easy for me to sift through. Okayness. Like it's easy to spot.
Yeah,
So I love nonfiction, but when I can find a good fiction book, I am
yeah,
excited, and I'm actually looking forward to diving into Christian fiction because I'm really there was like some authors that I would read that were fiction authors, and they would be like good, fun, romantic comedies. They wouldn't have cursing or like a lot of
right.
like
They're clean
yes, they're
fiction.
clean. But
Hmm.
one of my go tos, she's now starting to talk about witchcraft, and I'm like, girl, what?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Yeah, Christian fiction, I think is well, one of the important things about Christian fiction is it is becoming more diverse, which for me as a Black Christian woman was not finding Christian fiction I wanted to read. So I just didn't read it. I read nonfiction, like I said, and mainstream fiction, contemporary fiction, whatever I wanted to read, Toni Morrison, all the ones. And so, yeah, I would take a look at if you're trying to find good books to read. I would check out the Christie Award nominated books. That's a Christian literary award given to fiction authors, and there's several categories. So all of the ones that are nominated are usually some of the best of the ones that are published. And then there's also another part, the same part of the Christie Award is a award category called the Amplify Award, which features great fiction by authors of color, great Christian fiction by authors of color. And so they range genres. So, if you want to just kind of say, oh, here's a good list of things I can explore. And of course, once you dive into one, a whole world can open up. Oh, this person writes that too, and oh, they wrote this series. And you'll have a good time.
I'm
finding what you
so
like,
glad we
hopefully.
talked about this because I don't, I'm like, where do I find? Because I've never read Christian fiction. And I'm
Yeah,
like, I've only read Christian nonfiction and I read lots of it. It's pretty much the predominant, category of book that I read these days,
yeah,
just
yeah,
because I teach so much in ministry. So I'm like, I need a good fiction, so thank
yeah.
you.
You're
So now,
welcome. And fiction is so opening. Like, of course, you're gonna get great things from nonfiction, but there's you don't you get to just be engulfed in somebody else's experience and world, and be open up to something different than you've been looking at for a long time, your own experiences or people who are like you and things like that. Fiction is a wonderful way to broaden your you know perspectives and things like that. And Christian fiction, like I said, is getting better because I have a literature background, and I'm particular, about what I read. So I'm really excited to see Christian fiction growing in that
amen. So Javon, how did
way.
you make your way into book editing? Was that always the goal after college or what?
Oh, not at all. I didn't even so what's interesting and I think needs to definitely be improved is helping young people of color understand what the many ways they can, enter the world. And so book editing wasn't even a thought of mine. I think what I thought of first was writing. But like I said, I wanted to be a doctor, so I was in school for that, and I just felt like that wasn't the direction that God wanted me to go in. And so through some prayer and taking some time to really just listen, um, I, I felt like this is my true love. Books, writing, and so I just switched my major and went into English. Switched to English literature. Changed schools probably because I didn't want to hear anybody tell me, what are you doing? What are you're supposed to be a doctor. So I probably didn't want to hear that, and I left, and so went to another school and changed my major and all that at the same time. But yeah, when I was trying to figure out what in the world I was going to do with an English literature degree, editing was an option. And so I started to apply for entry level copywriting, copy editing type positions. So most of them were for magazines because I didn't see any, I saw very few, if, I think I saw very few opportunities for book editing, but I think I found one. And it was interesting. This is how I can be a little detailed. So I had my spreadsheet of all the companies I was applying to at the time. When I sent my resume, if they ever called me back or whatever. So only one. It was about 30 something. I remember this. It was 30 something I applied to at the time. Only one called me back. And that same one, we did the interview process. They hired me as an entry level copy editor, which is so if you ever wondering what there are different types of editing. But anyway, so that's what I started at. That's how I got started for this company in Florida. A small, pretty, niche type publisher. And worked for them for 12 years and then went and worked for Scholastic for as a nonfiction children's book editor, and then I was on my own with Embolden Media Group.
So
Hmm.
what does the life of an editor entail? Like what do you do from day to day?
Oh my goodness. For me, it was just exhilarating. But it's probably it is not for someone who does not absolutely love books and is not detail oriented and does not mind sitting still doing the same thing for hours on end. But basically what my day looked like, and so it looked different from the different positions that I held. My most exciting position, I think, was as an acquisitions editor, where I not only edited books, which means I read them from cover to cover, line by line, uh, correcting, questioning things, making sure they were following a logical format, making sure they're factual, making sure they're reflecting the needs of the target audience, all of that. So if I don't see certain things or I'm wondering if something is missing, I'm asking the author. I'm usually making comments in the manuscript. So we're usually working in like Microsoft Word a lot of times. And so we're using all those functions, the comments and the track changes and all that kind of stuff to make all those edits and ask questions. And then we get the author changes back and we smooth it all out, making sure it's what it absolutely needs to be. But then the other part that was also exciting was either as an acquisitions editor, in it, like I said, in addition to editing, I would either think of book ideas with my team. The product development team is how we were called at the time. We would come up with book concepts we felt like were great for our audience. And sometimes I would look for someone in culture and society who is speaking on those things, and I may reach out to them and propose an idea. So sometimes we call that, you're kind of commissioning a book a little bit. Hey, this looks like a great topic for you, kind of thing. So that was exciting. And of course, they'll put their spin on it and they'll help clarify the idea because they're the expert. But then there's the other thing where I would be approached by literary agents or the authors themselves with a book proposal. And they would say, hey, I'm writing this book on this or that. And then I would have, if I liked the idea, I was sort of, they call editors gatekeepers, because we kind of are the decision makers when it comes to what gets pitched to the acquisitions board and the publisher and all of that. So I would do that. If I liked it, I would pitch it to the publisher. So I'm pitching ideas, I'm coming up with ideas, brainstorming, fine tuning. It just had all of the exciting parts for me for someone who loves the life cycle of an idea. So yeah, that was basically, I guess that would be maybe a week or a month in an editor's experience, that I'll share.
What an experience. Oh my gosh, what an experience. So, one of my favorite fiction books is called Book Lovers by Emily Henry. And
Oh,
the main character in there was a book. I think she was a literary agent and she was pitching it to an editor. But yeah, I really enjoyed that book because I got to see, behind the scenes a little bit.
yeah. Hmm.
But anyway, at least that was one of my favorite fiction books from like a couple of years ago. I read it, I think, in 2020.
Yeah, nice.
But
Hmm.
so now you're the, oh my goodness, now Javon, you're the publisher. Like you're the big dog.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
why did you transition into publishing?
So
And the reason I
that's
ask
kind of,
that
yeah.
is because
You
not
help
just
me
because
understand.
you're a publisher, but because as a publisher, you don't get to do a lot of the editing anymore.
Oh, you're talking about now. So what I'm doing now with Embolden Media Group is assisting people. So one, we have a few different services that we provide the people. We provide people and the publishing industry. So on one part of that, we do assist people publishing their own books. So that's independent publishing. And so I hesitate to call myself a publisher because we're providing services like editorial support, graphic design, typesetting, that kind of thing to help them publish their books. It's still up to them to do. So they're paying us to do that. It's a paid service. And so from there, they are going to be responsible for the marketing and the promotion and all of that. But if you want a great book that's edited well, that has a great look, and you don't feel like going through the traditional publishing process, answering to people's meeting certain criteria that may not make sense for you right now, self-publishing is a great way to go. We call it self-publishing or independent publishing. So that's what we do in terms of publishing. So I hesitate to call myself a publisher. And so the other side, which is traditional publishing, how I serve in traditional publishing right now is as a literary agent. So I help people find traditional publishers. Traditional publishers pay in advance. They are investing in the author's idea. There is no money that the author is paying, but they do get paid based on book sales. So, so yeah, so um, transitioning into owning or founding Embolden Media Group came as a result of just so as I guess I could kind of share that. So moving from adult Christian nonfiction publishing to children's publishing, this happened about 2015. In 2015, I was moving from Charisma House to Scholastic, and I had built such in those 12 years working for the other publisher. I had built quite a bit of good relationships with my authors at the time. And as I was trying to transition to Scholastic, they kind of didn't want to let me go. And so I'm still getting, and they're referring me to other people, and all of this is happening. And so I'm still getting calls and emails and, can you help me with this? Can you do that? And they're okay with paying me, which is fantastic. The main problem is that there's only 24 hours in a day, and that demand for me to serve and help in that still Christian nonfiction space was overwhelming, actually, to the full-time job that I had as a children's book editor. And so it just came a point where I had to make a decision on what I was going to do. Am I going to try to stay here? Because I'll have to tell everybody no. And am I really following my passions and what I feel like God is leading me to do? And so I took it to prayer. Definitely had some great counsel and advice, and I just resigned from my 9 to 5 and took up Embolden Media Group full time.
Amen. I know one of the focuses of your firm is increasing diversity in Christian publishing. Why is that important to you?
um, I feel like if we are really to be the body of Christ, to be the bride of Christ, to be part of his kingdom culture, that we actually have to reflect the diversity of his image. And that should happen in what we read, who we listen to, when we're in church listening to preachers, singers, teachers, whomever. Um, I feel like we are getting a glimpse at the wealth of God's full character when we can really read and experience diverse perspectives. And when we don't, um, division has all the place to take up. And so has all the room to take up space, is what I'm saying. And because what happens is when you don't read diversely and you read all only your perspective, and you see only people who look like you, hear people who only sound like you, anything that's different, which there is tons of difference in the world that God created, um we can begin to fear unknown things that are, related to God. And so even if it comes out of the mouth of someone who looks different than you, and it's the same thing that you believe, somehow it doesn't have the same credibility, and somehow it's not quite right. And we begin to fear, hate, and set ourselves kind of at opposition of those things, and it just it creates um, a lot of room for, like I said, disunity, disharmony, um, power structures that don't represent Christ, lording certain cultural aspects over other people, things that God never gave authority to. And so, yeah, we have to, in order to, we have to read and experience the diversity of Christ, all nations, kindreds, tongues, and people, because that's His vision, And I think it's important for us to reflect that if we say we're part of His kingdom.
Absolutely. I once heard someone say that writing a book is so important that even God wrote a book. I
Hmm.
was like, whoa. So, one thing that I want to ask you is like, how can someone know if writing a book is for them?
I probably won't answer this quite the way people may expect me to. I feel like that's something you should interrogate yourself. Like, you need to know that. If writing a book is for you, if the thought ever comes to your mind, investigate what that looks like. Ask yourself, why would I write a book? What do I have to say? Who is even asking this of me? How many people have asked this of me? How often are people asking this? Am I, sharing a perspective that would really benefit or change or promote or enhance a certain part of life? I think you're the only one that can. First of all, you're the main one that needs to know that. If you don't agree with what other people are saying and it doesn't fit with what you've heard from God, let it go. Let it go. Everybody does not have to write a book, but if it is for you, I think you're going to know that. And I think being brave and courageous to follow through on the work that it takes to do that is the next step. But yeah, you really want to think about, what are you putting out in the world that would really benefit people? And like I said, who is asking this? Who is saying this to you? Um, a lot of that's what I'm getting at is a lot of times we're hearing this from other people. That's what I'm getting at. Sometimes we're not only coming up with these ideas ourselves. But again, if that question comes up in your spirit or someone approaches you with that, you definitely want to take time to investigate, is this from the Lord? What am I sharing that is of value? How many people are wanting to hear this? Am I being asked to, ask questions about this on a regular basis? Am I being asked to speak, on this topic? Um, all of those questions are important to actually being able to say writing a book is for me.
Yeah, I'm like I was just curious because a lot of people will say, and you're right, it does come from other people. A lot of people will share their story, and they'll hear someone say, "You should put that in a book. You need to write a book." And I'm like, "Do they?"
Yeah, yeah. Because the other
How do
thing
we
is,
know?
yeah, and there's so many ways to share a story. A book is not the only way.
Right.
You know, some people may do it better, as a counselor or a therapist. Somebody may do it better sharing their story as a speaker or a singer, or there's so many different ways to share a story. So you do want to think about, is a book the way to do it? However, I will say, and then what are your goals? Like, every book does not have to go to the bestseller list. Every book does not have to be, follow the same path as someone else's book. You could publish your own book, and it may be that your book is just for you. Maybe you need to journal. Maybe you need to have a blog. There's all kinds of ways that you express yourself. But I do think there's a lot of value to putting really important things in a book. A book is a legacy. You can look back on people's thoughts and look at their behaviors, their recommendations, their advice, all of that through a legacy, through a book. And I think that's, books, they live on from generation to generation. They tell us of times past, they help inform us of the future. So they're really valuable.
Absolutely. For the person who has clearly heard from God or clearly knows that they are wanting to write a book, what are some things that they should know before they start the book writing process?
um, I think they should be aware of the process, first of all, and they need to be aware of their own tolerance level for the process. I think a lot of times people get into writing and, writing a book and underestimate the sacrifice, and underestimate the process, underestimate what the process means for them in certain seasons of their lives. Um, you know, and that's only part of it, because the other part of it is, again, making sure you have an audience that wants to hear what you have to say. When we think about that word publish means um, to herald. It means to um, spread and share a message widely, and you need an audience for that. It literally is not for you to, it's not one of those things that you keep to yourself. So a lot of times writing a book, getting published has a lot to do with, like I said, that audience. And also call that having a platform. Sometimes we don't put the two together. We just know I have something to say, but you also have to think about who wants to hear it.
That's real. That's real. One of the things that you have put into a book is about, prayer and strategy around writing a book. And so I had to ask you, like, how can prayer be used strategically during the writing process?
Sure. And so I think you're talking about Pray Here Write 21 days of prayer and fasting for breakthrough in your writing.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So, prayer can absolutely strategically be used. And that book does go into I shouldn't say great detail. It goes into targeted detail because I'm very specific about what I'm talking about. And the practice of pray here, right? Prayer is communication with God. I think we know that. Prayer doesn't only involve us speaking or, you know, talking to God, but it also includes listening, and God does speak. And it also includes bringing in his word, and it also includes being obedient, So prayer, when you're talking about writing a book, includes all of those things being strategically applied to the writing process. So I'm praying, God, what are you telling me to do? Or what are you asking of me? What do you need from me, in this process? What do you want me to say? Who do you want me to say it to? One thing, I just mentioned earlier was having that audience. And I believe that God knows people better than we do. So he's going to help you discern what people need at the right time. And first of all, what you have that they need and how to express it if you take the time to listen to him. And listening can mean silencing everything else. And we do that a lot of times through fasting, which is talked about in the book. Um, you know, Fasting as, when it comes to dealing with hindrances and things like that are keeping us from hearing God, things that are coming against our confidence, our creativity, our empathy and love for others. All of those things play in your ability to write, especially for God, and being able to hear him appropriately so that you're writing in the way that he's calling you to.
So good. So good. So good. Okay, so my last question before we get into the lightning round of questions is, what are some tips for getting a manuscript accepted by agents and editors? Like, a person has a completed work and they're like, I think it's time for me to pitch this to someone. Like, what tips do you
Yeah.
have?
So, definitely know that if you're writing nonfiction, you don't have to have a completed work. That's first thing you could do. You need to have some sample chapters, maybe like 1 to 3 chapters. And then if you're writing fiction or a memoir, then you need to have the book finished and it needs to be tight. I'm sorry, children's books, memoirs, fiction, finished and tight, not even like a work in progress. I mean, it is a work in progress, but for you, it need for an agent to look at it, they don't need to have doesn't need to be any, oh, I'll finish in this time, or I forgot to put that here, or there's a hole in the plot. Nothing like that can happen when you're pitching fiction. Fiction, memoir, and children's books have to be crafted, they have to be well crafted, and they have to be complete when you're pitching. So just wanted to get that out the way. Nonfiction is a bit easier. However, with nonfiction, you need to know that you do need to have a pretty big or strong, energetic platform for nonfiction. This is when you're thinking about getting ready to pitch. And then um, for memoir, fiction, and children's books, your writing is the key. It shines. So platform may not be the most necessary thing in that space. However, your writing is. Um, and then when you're looking at agents and editors, you want to make sure that you're pitching to the agent that or editor if they're open to it. A lot of publishers are not open to what we call non unsolicited manuscripts or unsolicited book proposals. They're not open to that. So you need to have an agent actually. Um, Agents are going to be looking for what publishers are looking for. And so they want you to have, like I said, a pretty strong platform. They want to know that you understand your audience and that you know what they need from your concept. So part of that is called, we in the advertising or marketing world, those some of these things are called market analysis. And all of the things I'm talking about would be um, put in a book proposal. So agents don't necessarily want to get on the phone or on Zoom and talk to you about your idea. They want a book proposal. So send them a pitch through a query letter. If they then like the query letter, they're going to ask for a book proposal. So have it ready to go. And yeah. Oh, the one thing I also want to share, the thing I love to see in a book proposal is when the author has thought through how they want to market their books. Even though a publisher is a partner in that, a lot of work is still on the author. And a lot of people don't expect that and really don't like that about traditional publishing. But this is your product, your project, and you're coming with a portion of the audience that needs to receive your message. And so being able to understand how to promote your book so that they see it, market it so that they see it again, is important. So definitely have that kind of stuff worked out.
Oh
But
my
yeah,
goodness. The
yeah.
marketing of a book. I have had the opportunity to be coached by someone who wrote a book. And so she was my coach long before she wrote a book. She was teaching me how to like make a curriculum for a program that God was like, you need to create this. So she eventually wrote a book about business or something like that. It was on the New York Times bestsellers list. It may still be there. I don't know. But I got to see her process. And because she was trying to get on as many podcasts as possible, she didn't care about the size of your platform. And I will have sometimes authors pitch, I mean, not authors, I will have like an author's assistant pitch me to be a guest on the podcast. Um, or whatever. And I remember I pitched one person who was having a book that was about to be released, and they, because I'm like, hey, I think this book would be great for my audience. He was talking about purpose. And I was like, do you want to share your story and also your book on this platform so that we can know, anything that could help us? And initially they wanted me to pay, and I was just like, that
Mm,
do you want to sell books or no?
mm,
I'm like,
mhm,
do you want
mhm,
to sell books or no? Because I don't think that you
mhm,
want to sell books. If you want to sell
mhm,
books,
mhm,
you
mhm,
need to be trying to speak to as many people as possible. And here you have an audience of thousands of people in 70 different countries, and
mhm,
you're
mhm,
wanting me to pay you, and I don't pay. Like, I spend my own money to do the podcast. I'm spending my own
mhm,
money to help people, for free. And so
mhm.
I that really taught me about how book marketing, there might be a gap in some people's marketing efforts, because I've
Yeah.
seen, my coach up front, and I've seen like the work that she put in to get on people's podcasts, to get on people's platforms in order to promote her
Mhm.
book, so that she can get as many pre-sales as possible, and things like that. And I've seen other people's process. I remember there's an author by the name of Levy Ajayi Jones, and she doesn't do Christian books. She is a Christian, but she doesn't write Christian books. She just writes nonfiction. And I saw her process. She let us in on her process. And I mean, she had an in-depth process for how she was going to market her book. And I can absolutely see that that is an area that people who want to share a journey or a story, they don't always think through. They have these amazing books, but no one's buying.
Yeah. And it's a challenge because the industry has changed over the last, I don't know, 100 or so years, where publishers were doing a lot of the work, but so much has changed in the world since publishers were doing that. You know, social media is here. There's such a competition for people's attention and things like that. So if you're wanting to get a message to cut through the noise and people to you know, engage with what you're saying, you will have to put some effort in that. And you know, when we think of like business strategy, publishers don't necessarily have, you know, the business to consumer connection as much as you do as the author. As some, you know, you have that direct to consumer um, connection that publishers don't have, or I should say, maybe you have the opportunity for it. One thing I can appreciate is, you know, that there are people who are real craftsmen when it comes to writing. And being a marketing or salesperson is not something that's high on their list. Because when you think about social media, you know, becoming influential in social media is a whole other skill. You know, it means that you're doing, like, you know, maybe I'm not a podcaster, you know, but if I want to be an author, sometimes authors feel like they need to be a podcaster. Sometimes they feel like I got to be a video editor. Sometimes they feel like I got to be a model. I got to know how to put makeup on and do my hair so I can show up for people. You know, there's so much to it that, you know, it feels like, you know, it's overwhelming, especially for someone, like I said, who is, you know, a wordsmith, and they're really just, all they want to do is write really, really well, write good things that people can take in and improve their lives. But there is a little bit of, you know, having to put that out for people to know it's even coming. So I think there are ways to, you know, those are things I'll be teaching in upcoming workshops at writers conferences. You know, how do we balance that as creative people? We're not necessarily salespeople, like I said, or marketing experts, but there's still something about getting a message out. Like I mentioned, the word publish means to herald. If you think about the work of a herald, you know, think about an angel who's going to and fro, or someone in a town's crier, you know, who is in the middle of a town. You think about ancient towns and you know, times past before there were microphones and before there was social media. How do people get messages out? We're doing a lot of the same thing. Even when we look at Jesus, you mentioned that God wrote a book. Jesus, you know, demonstrated the work of the Father in the flesh, and he was telling the gospel, teaching and preaching the gospel. How did he do that? He was regularly connecting with people, going from town to town, sharing his story and other people's stories, impacting, you know, people's lives with stories, and of course the miraculous. But you know, our words have power like that too. So it may we have to kind of um, learn how to shift our perspective of what it means to get a message out and be excited about, you know, even uh, even God calling us to steward something like that is honorable. So yeah.
Absolutely. Javon, do you have any resources that you think would help people as they are trying to navigate the book writing process, thinking about navigating the book writing process?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, you can definitely, you know, feel free to go to my website, javonbolden.com. And in my shop, I have some online courses as well as books and about, you know, writing. I have been writing a blog since 2009 on a variety of topics, especially as they came up for me as I was editing. And so there's a lot of topics about how to know your audience, how to choose an agent, how to find an agent, how to get your book published, the publishing process, the editing process, the revision process, all that stuff. So you can find that on my blog. I also have it sort of categorized a little bit better, maybe on uh, in my link in my bio on Instagram. You can follow me there. I'm always sharing writing tips and so forth. And also, sorry, Instagram is at Jevon Bolden. Pretty much, I'm Jevon Bolden anywhere because you can find me on almost all platforms. But there's thankfully not very many Jevon Boldens in the world. And so also you can go to emboldenmediagroup.com, where we have our business publishing services and so forth that you can take advantage of. Also, writing coaching is available at emboldenmediagroup.com.
Awesome. Okay, okay, real quick, real quick. Here's our lightning round of questions. What is the best book that you read in the last year?
Sisterhood of the Yam by, oh my goodness, her name is escaping me just that fast. And everybody's going to know exactly what this is. This is what perimenopause does to people. My brain is gone.
Well, I mean, the title is
Oh,
specific enough for
Bell
people to
Hooks,
find it.
Bell Hooks, Bell Hooks, Bell Hooks, Bell Hooks, Sisterhood of the Yam by Bell Hooks. That's the best book I've read.
Okay.
I've really enjoyed that one. Okay, I got it.
You got it. All right. What is your favorite form of self care?
Alone time, alone time, and writing, journaling.
Same.
Yeah.
Okay. What is your ideal vacation location? Like, what city, country, where are you going for the perfect vacation?
Not far from, I live in Florida. So probably if I have to make a quick getaway, it's gonna be right here in Florida. Fort Lauderdale Beach is my favorite getaway. If I have to
What?
go further, yeah, if I have to go further, then I have to think a little bit more. But if I just need to get away, it's the beach always.
Yeah, that was my favorite beach when I lived in Florida. I lived in Hollywood and I love Fort
Oh
Lauderdale Beach.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I know exactly where that is.
Okay, last question. What is the best show that you've binged recently?
It was a K drama. It was a K drama. It was called King the Land. It was so great. I absolutely loved it. If you like low angst romantic comedy, clean, I would say that is a go-to for me. I absolutely. I don't usually rewatch shows, but I think I would rewatch that.
Okay, wait a minute now. What is a K drama?
A Korean drama. So it's,
Oh,
yeah, it's coming straight from Korea, Korean actors. It's in Korean language. And you could so I think I watched this one on Netflix, so you could get it. I like to hear people's languages when they speak them, so I do subtitles. But you could also do it where it's English dub, but it's, for me it just does not have the same nuance. I love to hear people speaking their languages around me. So yeah, that's what a K drama is.
oh my goodness.
And
So,
they're
Javon,
all the rage right now.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. But I don't. So, the reason why I don't know what K drama is because I don't watch a lot of television or movies.
I don't either. I don't either.
So, I thought this question was actually going to stump you, but you had something.
So I have young people in my house, and so there's all kinds of things I'm exposed to, and I love it because that helps me stay connected to what people are engaging in. I cannot, as a person who is in publishing, working with a variety of creators who are from, my goal, you mentioned diversity, my goal with the Embolden Media Group, we are here to represent and amplify and cultivate the voices of diverse people. And if I don't know what's happening around the world in different cultures with different people, and even in our own country, that, there's so many people from different nations represented in our own country, I would not be effective in my work. So I've always been a person who's loved varieties of cultures, and my children reflect that. And so they'll bring me stuff and say, "Hey, have you seen this? We should watch this." So I've watched anime. I know, I've read manga, and I mean, so I try to stay up on the different cultural expressions around the world. Yeah, music. I love music, so all of that.
Same. I keep young people around me. I remember I had a young person ask me, she said, "Do you know?" She's a teenager, but she was like, "Do you know what standing on business is?" Because she was telling me, she's like, "Yeah, my friend told me I wasn't standing on business," and I was like, "Do you know what that means?" Because she'll tell me occasionally, she'll say, "Sometimes I forget that you're old."
Yeah, that's so funny. That's so
She
funny.
was like,
Yeah.
sometimes I forget that you're
I think
old.
there's a difference in being old and out of touch and just up in age. I don't think those are the same thing. My age is just what I am chronologically, but I love staying connected to a variety of things. And I even I write kids books too. So if I don't know what kids are talking about, how they sound, what language they're using, phrases and all that, I'll just my books won't work either. So
Right. I had to get her together. I was like, girl, I'm not old.
yeah, yeah, I don't, yeah,
Girl, I'm just older than you.
yeah.
But I
What
didn't
does
know what
that
she meant.
even mean? Yeah,
Right.
right.
Like, have a seat. Have a seat. Well, Javon, this has been an absolute pleasure. Like, you gave us so much information. I know that this is going to help people because I just hear all the time about, how they want to write a book and they're completely unaware of the book writing process. I have a friend who wrote a book that's published um, and in the major bookstores like Barnes and Noble and Books a Millions and things like that, the big box stores. And one of the things that she says when people will ask her about what did she learn about herself in the book writing process, but the common answer is she's like, I didn't know how difficult the book writing process was going to be.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know
Yeah.
and so since I hear that so often, I'm like, dang, there's something that people are missing when they're wanting to write a book, that they're not aware of. And so I'm thankful that you were able to come on and shed some light. And I'm so grateful for your blog. I hope people actually go and read what you have there because you do have good information. Like all that stuff you shared, I was like, oh my goodness, because yeah, how does somebody pick an editor? How does somebody pick an
Hmm.
agent? How to tell if you need an
Hmm.
agent? So we
Hmm.
thank you. The body of Christ thanks you for being where you are and doing what you did. Because I mean, how I even found you was because your company helped with a lot of the books that I read. I was like, wait, what? Who's in Bolden Media Group? And then I just, like you, I'm gonna do some research. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I did research and I said, oh my goodness, look at this woman of God. And so this
Oh,
has been great. I thank you, thank you, thank you. And you've already told us how to keep up with you on the internet, which is at Jevon Bolden everywhere. So thank you for stopping by.
yeah, absolutely. It was absolutely a pleasure. Thank you so much for your kind words. And I'm so glad that people are just getting to know the clients we represent more and more. Just such beautiful people. So, yeah, thank you for your blog and the space that you're keeping here. And I just pray blessings on your work, that you'll go further and, maintain the strength and excitement that you need to keep going. So, very much grateful for you as well.
Amen. Receive, receive. Well, guys, that is all for this episode. Until next time.